When I first saw the trailer for this game, I thought it looked cool. It was essentially the same feeling I had when I initially saw Clair Obscur Expedition 33 trailer last year. Seemed cool, not expecting too much, but it seems like it will be fun to play. And obviously with Clair Obscur, it turned out to be a masterpiece, but with Lost Soul aside, I feel like the trailers were cooler than the game, and that's not really a good thing. The story is very... not that good, nothing special. I think it was very rushed and never properly explained certain things. For example, the entire reason the main character that you play as, Kaiser, does all these crazy dimension crossings is because he's looking for his sister's soul. And like, I don't really know her that well and never really gave me a good reason to want to save her sister. She has no personality whatsoever. In fact, almost all of the characters are faceless, boring, and uninteresting characters. I heard people say that the English dub doesn't sound great, but honestly, I think it's more of the writing. If Ben Starr was voicing Kaiser, I think the end result would pretty much be the same. There isn't any style, drive, or anything in the writing of the dialogue. It's pretty much monotone the entire time, and when the emotions, which happened like once or twice, were raised, it felt like it came out of nowhere. Minor spoilers, you meet the beast that steals Kaiser's sister's soul kind of towards the middle of the game, and at this point, his sister is barely mentioned within these missions except for when coming back to like the central hub base for an awkwardly paced flashback. I don't know why they do that. And Kaiser got really angry kind of out of nowhere. The pet dragon grandpa does a stereotypical, "Don't let the hatred consume you, Anakin," or whatever. And then you do the boss fight, kill the beast, then nothing. No mention of the randomly mentioned revenge or power or even his sister. I was confused. Kaiser wasn't satisfied or upset or sad or mad or he just had a monotone face after through all that. And it's not just him. All the characters around him are all monotone. Except for Arena, his like god pet dragon grandpappy guy. But he's just that annoying cranky grandpa that keeps yapping type of personality. But other than that, characters are terrible, the story is not interesting, the lore isn't really there. It feels like they never really talked about anything that's going on in the world. And I know there are games like Elden Ring and Hollow Knight where it's clear that it's not about the storytelling or have like a good or strong narrating story, but they have really good lore and you can tell that it's fully fleshed out even on a casual playthrough of the game when you're not actively seeking for these types of lore pieces. But for Lost Soul aside, I don't even know what I'm doing half the time. I know I have to get my sister's soul, but what does jumping into different dimensions and going through armies of corruptions have to do with any of that? Now, the actual combat of the game is actually decent and probably the only good thing about the game. I never played Devil's May Cry, so it might be more closer to that, but it reminded me of Final Fantasy 16. You have different weapons with different play styles for each of them. Each weapon has its own way of playing and has its own personal skill tree. You get far into the skill tree for a particular weapon, you gain more abilities, attacks for that weapon. What's cool is that when you unlock these abilities, it's an added ability. Sure, there are a couple of things you have to swap with one another because they conflict with each other, but especially with I would say the first half of the tree, it's adding more abilities, and that adds more into your combo. It kind of makes it more like a traditional fighting game like Street Fighter, at least compared with my experience with Final Fantasy 16. In 16, I was fighting by just pressing one button for an ability and chaining those one buttons essentially. With Lost Soul aside, I had a string of attacks where I would press, I don't know, like square 3 times, then hold triangle, release triangle, then press R2 at the right timing, then swap into a different weapon and do a different set of attacks. And I think just like in Final Fantasy 16, it does take a while to get a decent amount of skills on a single weapon and to even get to like your second and third weapon. But once it gets rolling, it's rolling pretty fast and it's actually pretty enjoyable. It just needed that same ramp up from what they had in the middle of the game in the beginning of the game. Speaking about the beginning, it is an actual slog. The prologue has to be one of the worst prologues I have ever seen. Too slow, nothing is really explained, awkward moments, nothing happens, and the performance, like optimization performance, was terrible. I was on max settings, and I would say my PC is capable of playing like all these modern games on max graphics. But whatever they had going on in the prologue turned my PC into a boiler. Choppy frames, weird cut-ins, and all that. But thankfully, all the bad graphic stuff and stuttering only happened in the prologue. And once I got past it, everything looked and played perfectly fine, which is kind of a shame because the demo of this game is only the prologue, and the prologue does not represent the game at all. even me being negative towards this game, the game has things better to offer than whatever disaster was in that prologue. When the ball gets rolling, the way you fight and the amount of tools given are good, but not so much the enemies. All the bosses, and I mean all the bosses, were not cool in my opinion. They all had a very samey look, nothing really made them unique. I think I saw on Twitter some people going crazy over the design of this one boss with wings, and when I first saw that boss, it looked out of place. The only cool thing about it was literally just the red part, like the red tip of the wings. Everything else was not cool, not interesting, and the fight mechanics on that, they were not memorable at all. I completely forgot about that fight. And as I'm making this video, I'm playing through Hollow Knight Silksong, and I can remember a lot of the boss's movesets and designs just by memory alone, because the way that they're designed are unique, the way they attack are unique, and the way that they're introduced were unique. Essentially, the presentation for these bosses are really good and memorable. Lost Soul aside, I can't even remember any of like the early bosses. I can only remember the bosses towards the end. It's just not interesting or fun to make me think constantly, and so I just forget them. And for most of the time, it can feel like a boss gauntlet fighting bosses back to back with little to no break in between. The breaks tend to be, I don't know, like a wave of enemy or two, or a very stiff platforming section, or an easy puzzle to solve. Black Myth Wukong also had a boss gauntlet feel, but the bosses were very memorable and were really well made, and the world was very beautiful. I just wanted to bask in it more. But for Lost Soul aside, I needed a break from the bosses because they were just sleepers. And a bunch of minor stuff I noticed is during some dialogue when the camera cuts to a new speaker, there would be like a weird and awkward stutter every time. They probably have it fixed by now, but it was very noticeable when I played it. It was very bad. Also, whenever you're about to kill an enemy or boss, right before a cutscene, you never see or hear the final hit on the enemy kill. It just immediately cuts to an awkwardly placed cutscene that has no coherent transition from like the gameplay to the cutscene. And it left me wondering if I beat the boss or not many times. Another thing, there is no gameplay tab in the settings. So if you wanted to autoplay dialogue without having to press auto button every time, you can't. If you wanted to change the difficulty, which for some reason this game doesn't have an easy mode, you can't. There's not even a way to hide accessories on your weapons too. I might have missed it, I just couldn't find a way to do that. If it is there, it wasn't clear to me. And also the save points are placed really bad. You can only refill your potions with Liana, and sometimes she's not there for some bosses, so you'll have to be fighting some bosses without a refill. And whenever you die to a boss, it doesn't save whatever changes you made to your characters, and you have to redo it, which is really frustrating to do. Look, Lost Soul aside is not a terrible game compared to something like Assassin's Creed Shadow or Starfield. I would much rather play this than those games. But Lost Soul aside is very rough around the edges. So many small nitpicks that it just drags the entire experience down. Whether it's something basically pointless to not being able to autoplay dialogue, to something actually important like boss designs and the content of the story and the pacing that it was at. Which is a shame because the actual combat of the game is actually pretty decent, and I think it's something that a person who plays traditional fighting games would like. But everything else like the story, the level designs, the characters, the boss fights, the performance, and all the little nitpicks about the game really hurts the overall enjoyment and presentation of the game. Again, I was initially excited for this game when I first saw the trailers, and I think the trailers are cooler than the actual game itself. I think if you're still interested in the combat of the game, I think you should wait for it to go on sale. If you're looking for a more well-rounded experience, there are probably other better games in the market. That'll do it for me for today. Make sure to like and subscribe as my goal is to get to 500 subs by the end of the month. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I appreciate you guys for watching.